To call the May 4th, 2021 work session back to order. And we are up for our legislative update, and we have our Tallahassee lobbying representatives.
Yeah, Ron and Megan are on the line. Ron, are you there?
We just need our technicians to.
We're here and we do hear you.
Okay, great.
Okay,
We can hear you. Can you see us?
yeah,
Yes.
Now we're beginning to see you. Yes. Okay. We see your PowerPoint.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, you can start
So we're
anytime.
viewing your screen, Megan.
Okay, wonderful. We will get started then.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for allowing us the opportunity to report to you today. Appreciate the time, school board members as well as superintendent, to report on the end of the 2021 session. As you're aware, it came in for somewhat of a smooth landing last Friday with a few bills bouncing back and forth between chambers the last week. A lot of bills dying on the calendar, which means they made it through all of their committees, but ultimately were not taken up by the legislature, even though they had plenty of time and ended up voting on the budget a little bit after 1 or 2 in the afternoon and brought the whole session in for a landing about 3 o'clock. And they usually are able to go until midnight, so they have effectively finished their business in Tallahassee and sent everybody home. We have begun unraveling the FEFP, and overall the FEFP document itself shows that schools will have a $38 per student increase. But I'm sure as Missy or finance folks have already begun telling you, this is a very odd FEFP. And frankly, the $38 per student increased funding that it shows on the document really doesn't represent the impact to districts. And the reason for that is because of the executive order that was issued in the spring that held districts harmless for missing students. The state ended up using in this FEFP the student count from the emergency order as the comparison for this new 21-22 FEFP. And they also backed out the money that was given to districts as a part of the hold harmless for the spring. So money that we received for students that were not attending school was backed out of this FEFP. So for Sarasota, this actually results in a funding loss of about 0.4% in the overall funding that equates to about $86 per student. And then you couple that with the employer cost increase on the FRS of about $38 per student, and that's the FEFP financial outlook that we're looking at from the funding formula. It is important to note that the 21-22 student count in the FEFP is based on the students that we expect to return in the fall, that the district certified that we believe will be here through our efforts of locating students. But the state did also put $464 million into reserves if more students end up showing up in the fall than we think, or if our FEFP funds get prorated due to increased scholarship students. So it's very important, that we continue every effort that we're doing to locate missing students. But just to hit a couple of the highlights that Megan has on the screen, there was $50 million added to the teacher salary allocation. So that starting teacher salary allocation is up to $550 million. There's $20 million increase for the mental health assistance. I mentioned the $464 million in reserves. We have talked about this, but the final FEFP did take full advantage of the increase in the RLE, or required local effort. So there is no rollback on that. And that's something, that we've worked on for many years. Charter schools did receive $182 million in direct capital outlay funding. So what that means is that we will not be required to share our 1.5 mils with them. Classroom teachers, including certified pre-K teachers, all are receiving a $1,000 bonus. There's money for school hardening and also money for guardian training. A positive note on top of some of these funding increases for different categoricals is the legislature did enact the intensive reading pilot program. they ultimately funded it at $6 million. About half of that is recurring funding, so it's intended to be back each year. The other half is non-recurring, but they divided that $6 million between 10 districts, and certainly Sarasota is one of the school districts there. The way that that will operate is each of the 10 districts will get a minimum of $300,000, and that equates to about $3 million of the $6 million. Then the other $3 million will be divided based on the student count in K through 5 of each of the districts. I anticipate we'll probably receive more than $300,000 in that second pot, so somewhere north of $600,000 total, just based on our student population versus the other districts in the pilot. I think we're about the 4th largest district in the pilot. So when that is looked at from K through 5 student FTE, we will get that second full allocation.
And thank you, Ron, for making sure that we were able to get in on that. That's important to us, and you being there is what made that possible. Thank you.
Well, we're very proud of it, and like we've talked about in the past, certainly Sarasota is looked at as an innovative county when it comes to reading programs, particularly with our Summer Learning Academy and some of the things that we do there, and the criteria, and it's not included in this sheet, but we're certainly we'll make sure Dr. Asplin has the criteria as well as our academic folks, but it's pretty flexible. We can spend this money on anything that we really want to bring students that we identify below grade level up, whether it's stipends for reading coaches, whether it's materials, programs. It's very flexible, but we will be certainly reporting on the outcomes of what we're doing, and hoping to continue and increase the funding for this pilot. The legislature would really like for us to show positive outcomes and then make it available to the rest of the state. I mean, that's the appropriations, education appropriations chair. This is one of his priorities. So it's something that we can certainly be on the ground level and show what works. Megan, if you'll turn to the next page on federal funds. This is really, once you get past the FEFP and some of the funding levels that we have there, which certainly are not in the positive area, the federal funds really give the complete picture as to what we're really looking at for the next couple of years. The legislature did go ahead and appropriate all of the ESSER II funds and the Round 3 funds. And these are funds that we do not have in the school district yet. We've had CARES up until this point, but what they did on the ESSER II is they directly appropriated to school districts 3 buckets of those funds. They're sending Sarasota $1.2 million to locate missing students, $6 million directly for academic acceleration, and $1.5 million for technology purchases. And then there's a remaining $1.1 billion, which will go to all the districts based on our Title I formula. And we will submit a plan just like we did for the spring reopening on, how we're going to spend those funds, and then those funds will be released to districts. But one of the I believe helpful decisions that the legislature made is, even after they appropriate these buckets of ESSER II funds, they held $800 million of the ESSER II funds back at the state level. And the reason they did that was because they saw a need for some districts to access that money between now and June 30th, because all of these appropriations will not be effective until July 1st. So this $800 million will be sent to districts based on districts' requests between now and the end of the fiscal year. Our research has indicated, in working with legislative staff in the department, that there's about 14 million of this funding available to Sarasota. So the department right now is working on correspondence to districts as well as how this will be requested. But we do have an opportunity to draw down some ESSER II funds between now and June 30th. But moving on to the Round 3 funds, which is about $7 billion for schools. This was also appropriated in the budget. It will be allocated based on the Title I funding formula. And this Round 3, the $7 billion, will be available to the districts to spend between now and 2024. We won't really be focusing on drawing these funds down until we've spent all of the ESSER II funds, but it's that third funding pot that will be available, and the legislature has gone ahead and put in the budget authority to allocate it, and it will be based on district plans being sent to the department, and then the funds will flow through once those plans are approved. And then there was a new issue that came up very late in session that we haven't talked about that I just want to put on your radar screen. And apparently, as a part of the ESSER II bill, there was an additional $46 million separate from the money that we've talked about that goes to school districts that is set aside to identify homeless youth and provide wraparound services to them and help homeless youth and assist them in attending school, whether it's summer school or normal fall and spring school. And they went ahead and appropriated this money for the current fiscal year and next fiscal year. So the department's going to work on exactly what they're going to do with this and how they're going to deploy it. But there seems to be another pot of money that's focused on homeless youth and trying to get them or assist them with attending school, whether it's over the summer or next fall at this point. So those are kind of the budget issues I wanted to cover. And then Megan's going to go into just an overview of some of the legislation that passed and didn't pass that's noteworthy.
Thank you, Ron. There was a very heavy education policy session up here in Tallahassee. I believe about 30 different legislative initiatives passed that had to do with education, all the way from VPK up into the higher education space. And so I'm not going to touch on all 30 of them, but I'm going to kind of run through and give you kind of a high-level overview of the most important, kind of most notable bills that passed, many of which we did talk about, as we spoke with the school board throughout session. But the first one that I'd like to hit on is the school choice bill. The ultimate bill that passed was House Bill 7045, which was the House's proposed committee substitute that they released about week 5 of session. As you'll remember, we did discuss early on Senate Bill 48, which was the Senate's proposal, but that ultimately kind of stalled on the Senate floor, and then they ended up taking the House bill, which did not contain many of the provisions that were in the Senate bill. But just most notably in the House bill, they are going to eliminate the Gardner and McKay programs and roll those students with disabilities into the Family Empowerment Scholarship Program in the future. The bill does maintain the Florida Tax Credit and HOPE scholarships as tax credit funded scholarship programs, but they are planning to fund all family empowerment scholarships with FEFP dollars from here on out, which, as Ron noted, that is part of the reason that student reserve allocation exists, because there was discussion amongst the budget writers about how many students might need to be funded through the FEFP. Only students with disabilities will be allowed to use an education savings account, and all of their students will be receiving a tuition voucher similar to how the Family Empowerment Scholarship works today. And the bill does definitely increase and expand the number of students that are eligible for the Family Empowerment Scholarship. And it also raises the income threshold to families of 4 making less than $100,000 as eligibility.
On that, Megan.
Next, I want to discuss yes.
Megan, on that, they also said for students in foster care, I'm concerned about how do you get, this funding for a student in foster care, which is a temporary situation. I mean, what if the children go back to the parents and they don't want the foster care? They don't want the voucher. I mean, how does that work? I mean, how do the... That's a very good question. So students in foster care are eligible to apply for a scholarship through the Family Empowerment Scholarship Program. That empowerment scholarship has to be renewed every year. And so if there was a non-renewal in the next year, if the child changed, foster parents or was permanently adopted, they would still have eligibility every year if they're still in foster care or in an adoptive system. Or an adoptive home, but they're not required to use the voucher. It's just an option for them. All right.
Okay. So moving on to Senate Bill 1028. So this was the education train of this session. This bill kind of bounced back and forth between the chambers, and for the majority of session, it was pretty much the college and university, charter school, Authorizer bill. So I know we've talked about that at prior meetings. The bill would allow colleges and universities to accept charter school applications. They would be the sponsor, and this charter school would be able to serve multiple school districts, and the school district itself would not be responsible for the performance of the charter school, differently from how it's set up today. The bill, in the final days of session, this bill kind of changed shapes multiple times. At one point in time, the House added school board term limits to this bill, which then was sent back to the Senate, where the Senate rejected that proposal and ended up adding several of their own new provisions that were from other bills. Most notably, they added parental retention for students in grade 3, water safety education requirements. The bill allows school advisory committees to meet virtually, and allows academically high-performing school districts to use up to 2 of their teacher planning days as academic days that they can do via virtual learning, but that must be subject to DOE approval on the front end. And so probably as you're aware, the House took the Senate bill back over in their chamber. They added the transgender sports language, stating that students who are biologically male cannot play on women's sports teams. They sent it back over to the Senate, where the Senate ended up taking the bill with that amendment and passing it out and sending it to the governor. And so it ended up being a wide variety of different provisions in that bill, but that bill did pass and was on the way to the governor's office for review. And so next up, I'll touch on these 2 bills that were both priorities of the House of Representatives and Speaker Sprowls. Actually, notably, both of these bills were signed by the governor today, who held a press conference to talk about them and kind of tout them as he signed. But so the first bill, House Bill 419 by Representative Grawl, this is an overhaul of the state's early learning system that essentially puts the 30 early learning coalitions under the purview of the Department of Education for oversight. The bill also makes changes to the way that VPK providers are evaluated, and it directs DOE to establish a VPK through grade 3 progress monitoring system that would be available for statewide use. And so it's interesting, House Bill 7011 kind of does something similar. So the bill requires DOE to establish a statewide progress monitoring system for grades VPK through grade 8, also for statewide use. And so it'll be interesting to see how the department implements the 2 bills with some kind of overlapping provisions in them. But House Bill 7011 also directs districts to use the results of that progress monitoring system to identify struggling readers and implement interventions. And as part of that initiative, the bill creates and the budget funded 20 regional literacy support coaches. And so they make a number of changes there, both bills with the intent of promoting early literacy. And there's actually a third bill. I just flip to the next page. The New Worlds Reading Initiative, which is House Bill 3. This was another priority of Speaker Sprowls, also really very focused on those early grades and literacy initiative. So this, the program essentially will deliver books to struggling readers who are in grades K through 5 at no cost to the student or parent. As I'm not sure if Ron mentioned this earlier, but during the final days of the budget conference, Speaker Sprowls actually allocated $125 million from the federal COVID relief funds, which was the third tranche of the American Rescue Act funds, to fund the state share of this program. So the way that we've done, I've just done back of the napkin math, and with the $200 million that has been currently appropriated for the program, we assume it will be funded for at least a few years, probably 3 years or more, depending on how many students do take part in the program. But the legislature estimated about 500,000 students per year would be eligible to receive home book delivery. So lots going on in the early literacy space this session. The next bill, House Bill 131, this is the educator disqualification list bill that was around, I believe it was around last session. This came back for a second year and passed, but essentially requires DOE to compile a list of educators that have committed certain offenses and that are disqualified from working either in public schools, charter schools, and private schools that are accepting public funds. And all of those participating or eligible schools have to check the disqualification list before hiring new employees. So it's a good one. I'm going to hit upon these next two quickly. They kind of both cover the same topic, but House Bill 519 requires new information, notably, I think it's human trafficking education to be included in health education curriculum. And then House Bill 545 requires districts to notify parents essentially of their right to make a written request to opt out their child from reproductive health education instruction. It also requires that a school board publicly adopt the district's sex education curriculum on an annual basis, and that those materials are posted on the district's website for parents to access. And that bill had a number of changes throughout session, lots of public testimony, but the end product seemed like a compromise position between a number of the stakeholders. The next bill, House Bill, or Senate Bill 590, school safety. So this bill actually, it took some of the requirements or the recommendations from the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas Commission, but it was definitely a negotiated bill between the House and the Senate, and didn't go as far as the original House bill had proposed to go, as far as taking some of those recommendations on withholding teacher salary, granting the Department of Education subpoena power, and other, somewhat controversial recommendations. But really the bill focuses mainly on school district policies and procedures around involuntary evaluation of students under the Baker Act. And it mainly involves increased parental notification before a student is taken off campus to be evaluated under the Baker Act. Also, the bill does put in mental health crisis training for safe school officers, and new parental notification requirements if there's a threat or an emergency ongoing on campus, on a school district's campus. There needs to be parental notification initiatives made. And then I'll move on. Sorry, I'm operating the PowerPoint too. Okay, on the next page, I hit three more. Sorry, I told you there was a lot of bills to cover today. House Bill 241, this is the Parents' Bill of Rights. And House Bill 241 requires school boards to adopt policies to promote parental involvement. The bill enumerates a list of all parents' rights with regard to his or her minor child's education and health care. And the school district needs to make sure that the parents are aware of their rights, and they have the ability to request certain records that are specified in the bill. House Bill 529 by Representative Fine requires that every public school begin the day with 1 to 2 minutes of silent reflection by each student. And Senate Bill 72, which is one of the first bills passed and has already been signed into law by Governor DeSantis, provides school districts with a liability shield from lawsuits alleging damages because of COVID. And so the next slide, these are some of the ones that did not pass the session that I'm sure we were aware of. I know we discussed Senate Bill 86. This was the controversial Bright Futures legislation. The bill really never got any traction on the House side. Speaker Chris Browse had pretty much indicated that he'd take a look at it, but their chamber never really released their version of the legislation. After there was quite a bit of pushback, both from parents and from student groups. And by the end of session, it was pretty watered down on the Senate side, and so it never really went anywhere. But something I do want to note, because Bright Futures was fully funded in the state budget at the 100% level for Florida academic scholars, and the 75% level for the medallion scholars. But there has historically been a $600 per year textbook stipend that was also funded by the budget for the academic scholars recipients, which are those highest performing students that receive the 100% of tuition being paid for. The legislature did cut that $37 million in funds from the budget, citing the need for recurring budget cuts because they had enough non-recurring dollars to make a lot of investments, especially based on the influx of federal funds. But looking at places to cut non-recurring funding, that was something that was not put together in this budget. And so it will be interesting to see if there's pushback or there's any outcry from the public about that, or if it we'll continue to watch that issue as it develops.
Megan?
The next
Megan?
Yes.
Is the Bright Futures still funded by the lottery and the of that, or where did they cut those funds? Was it general revenue or
Yes,
was it lottery dollars?
The Bright Futures is funded through the lottery dollars, is my understanding. I can get back to you with a 100% certain answer, but I'm pretty sure it comes out of the ETF trust fund.
Yeah. I don't know if there's been cuts to the lottery dollars. I don't know. Okay, thank you.
And just to provide a little bit of background on this, the textbook stipend cut really did, it was sort of this is the way that, the chamber, the Senate, who wanted to make a change and wanted to, do something on Bright Futures, could make a cut to Bright Futures that wasn't as controversial as making a cut to the, either 100% tuition paid for or 75% tuition paid for, that there was quite a bit of outrage over, and that the governor had said, you need to fully fund Bright Futures. So this, I think, sort of was the only place where they could really make a change. But I wouldn't be surprised that if in future years, when recurring funding is, back and we have a healthier stream of recurring revenue, that this doesn't, make its way back onto the table. And then the next two bills, Senate Bill 1014 and House Bill 835, these were the bills that would have made changes to the union dues process by prohibiting the dues from being collected directly from by the school district, kind of through the paycheck process. Neither of these bills ended up passing. They were, highly debated. There was a lot of public testimony and a lot of a lot of partisan discussion on this issue. Ultimately, neither of the bills ended up making it out of committee onto the floor, and so both did die. And then same fate with Senate Bill 84, which was the Senate's proposal to close the pension plan to new enrollees. It would not have made any changes to benefits that would be held by current FRS employees, but it would not have allowed any new members to come in. They would have only been able to go into the investment plan. The House never actually rolled out their proposal on this bill, and the Senate bill never ended up making it out of committee. So we may see, some of these initiatives back next year, but it is, since we're 1 week out, it's too soon to tell. And with that, I will pause, and Ron and I can answer any questions you might have.
Karen?
Yes, quick questions, Karen Rose. On the first page, you had $6.5 million for guardian training. Is that limited to districts with guardian programs only?
Yeah, I believe that training goes into the Guardian pot. So any district that did use Guardians, or charter schools that used Guardians and were having them trained by the local sheriff, that's where those funds would be accessed. So it's not limited to specific districts other than district. I mean, somebody needs to be trained in that district for either a district school or a charter school to access those funds.
Thank you.
Would they go through, we don't do the Guardian program, but I think some of our charter schools do. Do they have to come through us to get that, or how would they access those funds?
I believe they work directly with the sheriff. I'd have to go dust off the Guardian laws to make sure I'm recalling that correctly, because I haven't looked at it in a year or so.
I'm sure,
but I believe that they have a requirement to have, a school safety officer or a guardian present. If they would like to go the Guardian route, then they work with the sheriff to tell them that we've got guardians that need to be trained, and then the sheriff kind of does a training, schedule to get all the guardians that would like to be trained each year.
Well, I'm sure then the charter school group and the sheriff will know how to access them. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? I'm, concerned about the Parents' Bill of Rights. Some teachers are concerned that they won't be able to have conversations with students, that they'd have to go and tell the parents. I'm not quite sure what all that said, but then we have to come up with new policies. So I would imagine our attorney will be looking into that and getting some of those answers for us as we move forward. I'll be
Yeah, and we will
interested to
work
see
with
how that comes out.
with your legal counsel on that bill. As I understand, the final version of the bill is it doesn't establish any new rights that are not currently in place in Florida law that we certainly, are following. What it does is kind of collect them all into a single place and also have the district make sure that parents are able to review them in a single place instead of having to find them in all different types of policies and procedures and different laws. So I've always viewed this bill more of a clearinghouse of existing parental rights and assisting parents in understanding what those rights are. But we'll certainly, go through the details. And as Megan mentioned, there's a couple of bills that do require some school board action, either whether it's, adopting something in public or having a new policy and procedure. And we'll certainly be working with everybody to get those in place before they are brought to the board.
Oh, so you're not finished with telling us yet. Okay, are you going to share that PowerPoint with us?
We absolutely can.
We already have it, I think. Did we not, Megan, do we have your notes? I received something from you earlier today that was very much.
Oh, I didn't do my emails.
I did share it with Kathy Tompkins. So
Okay.
I think she may have shared it with y'all, but if you need me to resend, I'm happy to.
No, if Kathy has it, we'll get it. Thank you. Dr. Asplin?
Yes, Ron, I just had one quick question. I know you mentioned on the reading pilot there was criteria involved. Did you say you were going to send that to us?
Yes, I'm going to send you the actual proviso and the reporting dates. That will be something that we will be. It will also be a part of the grant application once the budget is signed. So we'll have all of those pieces, and we'll be making assurances in order to access the money that will be, following the criteria and also making the reporting. But if you guys want to go ahead, as I expect, to begin to think about how you would design the program, because we anticipate this program certainly not being vetoed by the governor, we'll get that to you so you can start looking at it and whiteboarding what you want to do with the money.
Okay, thanks, Ron. Do you recall how many years the pilot is for?
So the pilot is going to be year by year on the funding, but it is important, and I kind of glossed over it, but let's get back to it. So they funded this with two types of money, both recurring and non-recurring. The recurring funding is funding that you can count on a year by year basis. So half of the pilot is funded with recurring, approximately half of it. The other half is non-recurring. And so at least half of the program we can count on continuing. But I will say there's a strong commitment from the legislature on this pilot. So I believe that we can count on it continuing for the near future, at least until it's been proven to be a success, or if districts believe, no, this is not something that is the best use of these funds. But I anticipate it having an impact.
All right, thanks, Ron.
Jane?
Well, Ron and Megan, I just want to say thank you. You did a great job for us this year, and it wasn't a great year. But that isn't because of either of you. The session was painful, and it could have been more painful. We all know that, so we thank our lucky stars that it wasn't more so. But you all do a great job for us, and I really like working with capital cities, and I like both of you, and I really appreciate your efforts on our behalf. So thank you very much.
Again, yes, this is Shirley Brown, and I did, repeat what she has said. Mitzi, our financial, did you have any questions for our lobbyist, or? No, she's been getting her information from various sources too. So we appreciate all you're doing for us, and will continue to be doing for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for the time and the support.
Thank you.
Yep. Now we are to member comments. We've been getting a lot of emails the last few days regarding mask policies. Are we going to be having the health department on the
Yes, they're going to be on standby and be able to answer any questions that we might have at the board meeting. Are they also available today, right now? No, but at the board meeting they will be.
Do we need to talk about where we're going on the mask policy? Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask? We can't talk in between. Jane?
Well, as I understand it, both of the executive orders that were released last night really reflected more the work of cities and counties, not school boards. Our executive order is still in place until July 1. So I think that was very confusing for some people who did send us emails. And as I understand it, there really is no change to education at this point in time. So I'm okay with proceeding as we have. Yes, the numbers have been better, but the numbers haven't gone away, and they're not as low as I'd like to see them in Florida. So thankfully and hopefully they will continue to go down, but they seem to plateau at a certain level and don't seem to go down. So again, variants are scary, and so I'm happy with moving along as we have.
Well, in addition to his executive order said for orders that were done after July 1, 2021. So it didn't apply to us as our policy also because it expired before his takes effect. I wanted to talk about vaccines, and there was an article, I believe it was, and I see you wanting to talk too, that the vaccines, they're saying they want help getting them distributed, and do we want to look at having vaccines distributed at some of our schools? They say if you can get 50 people together, and I know one of the problems I think we had a day down in South County, and then last weekend we had in North County. I'd like to find out how many students have come forward for those, but I know it's also a problem because they have to have a parent with them. I want to make sure that we can offer the vaccines for the students and their parents, and I do understand that they're coming very close to having the Pfizer for 12 and over. So I would like to see us look forward to working with our schools and perhaps setting up these vaccination sites, around the county so that the parents and the child, can come in and get the vaccinations, before school is up or even throughout the summer, as much as, whatever the need might be. But I think, we've got a population, and if we only need 50 to sign up for it, let's get 50 taken care of, is what I'd like to see. Karen?
Yes, I think it's worthwhile to clarify relative to the mask conversation that it's been announced at previous workshops that currently the board, if I'm correct, has decided to allow the current policy to expire and sunset as it's intended to do at the end of June. And if there were anyone were to look at changing that policy, it would require advertising it for 30 days. So I think that the public believes that it could just be automatically dismissed, and I would look to our council to just validate that we would need to advertise that for 30 days, which is different than what the public perceives us as able to do.
Well, put your mic on.
Your mic.
All right, and pull it closer.
Applies to school districts but does not become effective until July 1st. So when you read those two policies together, they don't impact us through the end of the school year. What happens post 7/1 will be up to you and will be a matter of policy. We'll look at how policy is enacted, but yes, if you go through the regular process, That does require posting and notification, and it's not an instant thing. My understanding is that these were enacted pursuant to emergency authority, and the ability to do that is now restricted. And if you want to, from a policy standpoint, re-up the mask policy, there are posting and notification requirements and public input and all of those things, and you can, pass a policy. There are other considerations as well, like liability and things like that. But generally speaking, the school board is empowered as a unit, if you so choose, per statute. It's Florida Statute 1143 to enact dress-related restrictions if you chose to do so in furtherance of the health, safety, and welfare.
Well, on the opposite side of that, just please clarify that if any school board, including us, were to want to delete a policy, that would also require 30 days of publicly posting it. Is that correct? Because I think there's community members that believe that we can just delete a policy. Is it required to advertise it for 30 days?
Not that I'm aware of. I think we could just kind of get rid of a policy if we chose to do away with the policy.
Thank you for that clarification.
We don't have to advertise to remove a policy?
No, I mean, not that I'm aware of, but I might need to look at that closer.
No, I mean, because we've always advertised our policies for 30 days before we took the final vote.
So just for clarification, so what you're saying is if a motion was brought up at a board meeting and it was voted upon and it wasn't on the agenda prior to that, that's okay.
So I'd have to go back. As you all know, I wasn't here when the mask policy was enacted, so I'm not certain if it was enacted on an emergency basis or was enacted through the regular process. So maybe you all can educate me on that. But these executive orders say that the policies enacted based on emergency orders, such as the COVID-related ones, are no longer going to be effective. And I think that's effective. One of them that applies to us goes into effect on 7/1. But I think after that, then if it was enacted based on emergency authority, then it can simply go away at that point.
Well, yes, it'll go away, but
I think what Mrs. Rose is asking, I believe, I don't want to speak for you.
Please say it in a different way.
I think she's asking if a motion was brought to the floor tonight, for instance, to end or expire our current mask policy as of tonight, and it was voted upon and passed, that it would be deleted from our policies.
I believe you would need to post that, but this policy sunsets on June 30th anyway.
Right.
So
what she's asking is if the board wanted to sunset it today, is that even possible if the vote is brought to the floor and voted upon favorably that the policy end tonight? Is that even possible? Or does it have to go through, what she's asking is, does it have to go through our process of placing it on the agenda and advertising it and going through that process to be able to be voted upon?
I'd want to take a second look at it before I made a decision.
I know that our current procedure is that we workshop it, and when and then we don't vote on it the same day we workshop it, and then it's put on an agenda, and then after we vote on it to advertise it, then it's 30 days. And I think if I'm not mistaken, you're saying when you just look at that time frame, by the time we even would do it, it would be June 30th.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, because that's the clarification that I think our community needs, because they think that we can do things that we may or may not be able to do. And I think that I look to council to make clarifications so that we are communicating in a very clear, transparent manner of what's possible and what isn't, given the different perspectives in our community. I think that is the start of any conversation.
Right. And it wouldn't be fair, to our parents now to go and make a change without giving them time to comment on it and to read what we're saying. So, and something of this importance, I surely wouldn't want to do without going through our original procedure of workshopping it, bringing it to the board to vote to advertise, and then to vote to do it. But again, those timeframes overlap. It'll retire. by June 30th.
Point well taken. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking for legal counsel to validate what our requirements are as a board so that we're very transparent with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? And if there's no objections, I would like to have Dr. Asplin follow with the health department. Maybe we can talk to him tonight, because they did say in the paper, if you can get 50 people, they want to do that. And I think we are in a position to do that, with our high schools. And at any point when we can get the middle schools done, it's wonderful. I mean, we've got adults that are mostly vaccinated. I'd like to say, okay, adults, take off your masks. You don't need them anymore. But
Yes, we can certainly follow up with the health department on that. And Mr. Dumas, do you have any further information on that at this time, or is it something we do need to talk to the health department about? Yes, so we'll follow up with them.
Good. Thank you, because I'd like to have our kids safe too. All right, thank you. So with no further business, I will call this meeting to an end, and we will see you back here at the meeting at 6 o'clock. Thank you.